I was born in Blythe, California on August 23, 1921. Leota, the oldest, Leoma and Loyal were born either in Oklahoma or Texas. Mom and Dad moved to California where I was born. He got a job at Blythe helping to build one of the bridges over the Colorado River. Blythe is so hot, some of the family slept on the roof. We little kids were too young and might fall off. Loyal did fall off and broke his arm. I went barefoot, of course, and it was so hot I could not walk in the sand in the middle of the day, but had to jump from the shade to shade of a sagebrush to keep from burning my feet. While in Blythe, my father and mother were working their way towards a divorce. It was a very contentious marriage. To this day, I am not exactly sure of the underlying reasons, but strongly suspect infidelity played a major part. I used to lie awake and hear them arguing through the paper-thin walls. If there was any attempt to save the marriage, no doubt it had to do with staying together because of us children. I resolved I would never do this to my kids. It affected me that much. People, keep this in mind. If you think divorce is a solution and has no effect on your children, think again. Later, after the breakup and Dad had to leave me with a babysitter, I cried all day until he got back home, which was just a tent in an orchard during harvest. I remember this incident to this day. Kay told me, too, that Diane cried all day at the day nursery while I was away in the Army. During World War II, she worked at the Railway Express Agency to supplement her 80 government bucks a month while I was gone. It costs money to make war. They worry about PTSD in soldiers. They don't worry about PTSD on a child whose parents break up. What is the difference? I told Kay when I married her I would never leave her. Whether I could live up to the standards that she would want to stay with me was something else, of course. But she overlooked my shortcomings, which no doubt were many, and we have been together now for 72 years. This picture of Rusty will freak out the enemies of the Second Amendment. All the foregoing was going on in the 20s. I don't remember the sequence of houses we lived in, but we did live in Madera, where Flora was born, across the street from a grade school, and if I remember right, I went to kindergarten there. That cannot be right because when Flora was born, I was not old enough to go to school. On the other hand, we may have lived there twice, which is more likely. Madera was the only place where I could have gone to the store for Mother, as all the other places we lived were in the country. She said when I got to the street, I would wait there until there was not a car in sight and then run across. On the other hand, she said Loyal, my brother, and a friend would wait until a car was approaching them, then dart out in front of it to hear the tires screech. We lived in the country and in one of these houses at one time, and when we came home, it had burned to the ground. Rusty was born in Visalia, so we lived there. I used to have a picture of Grandma Ferguson picking cotton outside Visalia. So many of my pictures I can't find. She was quite old and before welfare, so if you didn't work, you didn't eat. I think we had moved back to Blythe when my parents broke up for good. What I did there in Blythe could only have happened when I was old enough to run wild. Sneaking into the movie theater, terrorizing little black kids, pick on the little ones, of course, who could not fight back. Besides, I always had my older brother along. So they sent us kids back to Oklahoma to live with Grandma and Grandpa Gudgel, all 6 of us. I must have been 7 or 8 because I would have been in the 2nd grade, but they kept me back into the 1st. After a few weeks, though, they put me into the 2nd. We lived at Boggy Depot, which had been an army depot during the Civil War or Indian Wars, I don't know which. The nearest post office was Coleman. Boggy Depot was just a road intersection at that time. There was a cemetery there which was moved when they created a lake, and it was flooded. My great-grandfather, Thomas Jefferson Gudgel, was buried there. The graves were moved to another location, and his has been lost. His father, Henry T. Gudgel, was also lost in the Civil War because he died when there was a huge number of casualties from typhoid fever, and in the chaos, or the way they handled huge numbers of casualties, where he is buried is unknown. The military tries to keep a record of where soldiers are buried, but they did not always succeed. General Grant had picked the flat spot next to the Ohio and Mississippi rivers and called Camp Holt. Soldiers must have drunk from the river water. He lasted about 6 weeks before he died. I remember I would string along when my uncles went hunting for a possum at night. Possums sleep while hanging by their tails from a tree branch. We hunted not for fun, but for food. We raised cattle and hogs for food, too. We couldn't live on possum only. A number of the daughters had married and moved to California. The picture of us in front of the truck was taken in Texas on the way. I don't know which relatives lived there. I don't remember much about the trip, but some things that were told to me or I read in some of Opal's writing. At the inspection station, I remember this. At the California line, the inspector made us take everything out of the truck and put it on the ground. They were just doing this to be nasty to the Okies. Later, I talked to Opal about it, but he had forgotten all about it. For me to have remembered it meant that it must have been pretty prominent at the time. In Arizona, we had transmission troubles and a nut got dropped into the transmission. Rusty's hands were so small he could get in and pick it out. Whether they had the tools to take the transmission apart was doubtful. You can see by the picture that they had tires in case of flats. In those days, a flat tire was very common, but we did not have a flat tire on the entire trip. Anyone who has driven Highway 99 into Los Angeles knows of a long downhill section going down into the San Joaquin Valley to Bakersfield. When we got to it, they were so happy that they just put the transmission in neutral and let it coast. Wrong. The transmission could not take it and burned out. So they had to call one of the son-in-laws to come and get us. So that's how we wound up in Chowchilla, which is the name of an Indian tribe in the area.